apprenticeship, familiarization, get to know it, really, really pays off. Let's just take a simple example of starting an Amazon business. The last thing you want to do is just start, jump into it and start ordering from China. And now you find yourself in trouble. I've heard those stories so many times. So, either one of two things, either learn from somebody or start on a very low pilot level. Like, I'm going to order some Frisbees and just going to try that out and learn on a small scale. That's number one. And then number two, as I mentioned before, have some idea of how you're going to fund that thing.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Riggs Eckelberry. And Riggs was brought up internationally. Dad worked for Procter & Gamble, so moved around a lot, and then got into the nonprofit space and wanted to make or help make changes in the world. At 22, became a ship captain in the South Pacific. And then in the 1980s, started to get into the computer and technology company, or started a computer and technology company, and then got into the dot-com boom. I'm getting tongue-tied all over the place. And computer communications, and then in the 2000s got into software marketing and also got into innovation. And then that's kind of what led to, or after a variety of different positions, worked his way up to CEO of the business that he's doing now, that he'll be able to share a little bit more about. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Riggs.
That was an excellent introduction. Devin, you must do prep calls to get all this.
I always like to know a little bit about who we're talking with. So it was good to be able to condense a much longer version into the 30-second version of it. But with that, why don't we rewind and unpack it just a little bit, and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started moving around internationally as your dad worked for Procter & Gamble.
Yeah, it was kind of a Mad Men kind of scenario where he was definitely John Hamm. And welcome into the office. How about some whiskey? Right? It's like that whole scene, which seems so distant now. 3 martini lunches and all that stuff. I don't know how people worked after that. I guess they didn't. But he apprenticed early on. He's somewhere on the internet. I posted his memoirs of a soap salesman, where he, when they first got with Procter & Gamble, they apprenticed in the Bronx, doing shelf placement, putting up Tide on shelves. And then actually, from what I understand, it was a very happy time of his life. He and my mom lived on the Lower East Side, and very carefree and penniless on Jane Street. But that turned into his first assignment, which is, hey, go run this new branch up in Toronto, Canada. And he got a taste for it. And when he had an opportunity to go, on the sort of management track back in Cleveland or Cincinnati, actually, he said, "No, I like these foreign branches." And so, perhaps at the cost of his career, he started running branch after branch. I was born in Toronto. We moved to Puerto Rico, then Venezuela, then Paris, Brussels, and that's where in Brussels he moved on to become an admin, McCann Erickson, and eventually started his own consultancy, helping American companies locate in the U.S., in Europe. But while he was doing that, the tide turned, and eventually he headed the New York office of Société Générale, of the equivalent of General Electric in France, doing a bunch of acquisitions in America. And then he had an amazing career. He ended up in Africa doing a lot of privatization. And so I think a lot of that rubbed up on me, in that he was, by the standards of the time, I think, very ADHD. I have my godfather, he had one line on his CV, which is partner, Debevoise Plimpton. That's it. That was not my dad.
Mm. So your dad, you kind of grow up with your dad doing or running or kind of running around the world, being the madman, and then you kind of grew up in the international arena. Then as you or continue to grow up, I think you started to get into the nonprofit space and kind of wanting to look to change the world. Is that right?
Yeah, I fell in love with that idea coming out of boarding school in the United States, and it was the '60s, and anything was possible, and I still love the whole idea, and did that for the better part of a decade, during which I also became a ship captain, and at one point, not involved with a nonprofit, I was a ship captain and first mate in the South Pacific on tramp steamers. I was a whole adventure all by its own, and at a very young age, as you said. So I arrived into the early '80s, and I really felt that technology was going to change everything. And without abandoning this sort of change the world mentality, I felt that technology moves really fast and the whole world was turning to that. And that's when I started, really thinking as a technologist. And with being a technologist, of course, it actually institutionalizes ADHD. You need to be that way. You need to be like, we have a business model. Let's destroy it. Let's cannibalize our own product line. Boom, right? Which normally you'd never do, but in tech you have to, or else you die.
So no, I agree with you. And technology, as it continues to be introduced, evolves, changes, and you always have to keep on the forefront if you want to take advantage of it. So ship captain for a period of time, 22, going around the South Pacific, and then you shifted over in the '80s and started getting into computer and technology. Now, kind of walk us through, what did you do in that arena? Because I think you were there and you started a company, you got into the dot-com boom, got into communications, got into software marketing. So kind of walk us through a little bit of that part of the journey.
Well, the '80s was a lot of fun, but it was also a train wreck for me because I knew nothing. I was very gleeful. And this is one of the things, if you want to disrupt a market, learn a little bit about it. I think that makes sense, right? So I was like, hey, okay, boom. I love the promise of it. I read the tech magazines like they were literally truthful, which no, it was all BS. And so I started becoming an evangelist and converting, brick and mortar businesses from those safeguard, bear down hard kind of ledgers to wholesale distribution type products generally. That's what I mostly worked with. And it was fascinating. I'd go in there, I'd spec it out, get it going. The problem was, number one, I was undercapitalized, and it's very hard when you have no capital to have 12 people in New York City. That biweekly payroll is like, oh God. It just comes up on you again and again. And I'm very proud of the fact that I never did miss payroll ever in my career. But I did get in trouble because, I was in trouble, but I was working my way through it. But towards the latter part of the '80s, I lost heart. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much work getting these companies going that it wasn't making really any money at it. And what I didn't realize was that creates potentially a 25-year relationship with that company where you're charging them every month. And I had no sense of that, recurring revenue model. I ended up giving the business to my best salesman, Juan, and he's a multimillionaire. He literally told me that, a few years back, he said, I still have clients that you and I opened up back in the day. And that kind of life cycle is something I hadn't thought of. It's like, you know what, just manage those sites and keep them going. And it's like being in the insurance business. 90% of the time, they don't even need you, but it still generates revenue. So, one lesson was, first one was know your space. And I think I learned the hard way, that part. Second part was be aware of capital and what it's going to take, depending what you do. And the third one is, don't give up, pivot, persist, do what you got to do, whatever. take a day job, do whatever it takes, keep on going, because the odds are you've got something good. And, someone said, any plan boldly carried through to completion is better than no plan at all. So just keep on trucking, right? And Patton said something like that as well. So that was that big lesson. And after that, and I left New York City, and I really learned a lot about marketing, because I became a wine importer, and then I became a direct marketer. I even worked for a time in film. And I just got to know a lot about commerce and marketing. And at the age of 40, I took a season off and went ski bumming, which people thought I was insane. But it was one of the best years of my life. I enjoyed it so much. Lost 30 pounds and just didn't sleep, just had so much fun. And that kind of set me up for the next stage, which, as you say, turned into the .com.
So now you do that, and it sounds like good eclectic assortment of different experiences and different avenues you went down. So now you get into the .com area, which is a whole different animal, and had its rise and fall. But what did you kind of do during the .com era, and what did you focus on?
Right. So, well, I got drafted into a company in the utility software space called Quarterdeck that was making a big wager on internet. And they did not succeed. They launched 28 internet products, and every one of them failed. But what I did for them is I learned product management, which is, I tell you, product management is a wonderful discipline. You learn how to plan and market and manage the product's development. You're the CEO of the product, but you have no powers, like total responsibility, no authority. And so you learn a lot about, marketing internally to, okay, I need more help. I need more QA people. Well, nobody's helping me. I'm going to go sell it to the QA people, that kind of thing. And so that was my first real experience working in the corporate world. We could do a whole podcast just on that. But what came out of that is I made a tremendous amount of connections, because when Quarterdeck blew up, of course, everybody was scattered to the four winds, and now I had a network. And they went to Microsoft, they went here, there, and everywhere. And so following Quarterdeck, I started basically being a consultant, and then taking VP or C-level jobs, and being a consultant, C-level jobs, and kind of doing that for about a decade. And that's when I arrived at my big opportunity in 2006, 2007, when I was finally I was COO and president of a software company that we got onto the NASDAQ. And just before it got on the NASDAQ, I went, you know what, this is not for me. I want to be a CEO. And for as my bad karma, I got to have the job. It was like, don't watch what you wish for. But so I called up some fund friends of mine, and I said, I want to be a CEO. And they said, yeah, but guess what? We're not doing tech anymore. We're doing green. That's the hot thing. And we want to launch an algae company. What do you want? We need three things. We need a bright idea. We need a patent, and we need a CEO. So we got you. We need the patent. It turned out I have a fabulous inventor brother who was super outside the box, and he had a patent that could be put to work for this. And of course, we had the bright idea of algae for biofuels. Good. We launched. It was so much fun. The model that we operated on was go public right away, do an S1 immediately, and raise money in the public arena. So day one in 2007, we were a public company, and it was so much fun running an algae company, because it's kind of a who knew. And I got lots of attention. I was on Bloomberg. I was on CNN, on Fox Business. Stuart Varney called me Algae. I'll call you Algae Man, and that was a lot of fun. But then it imploded, because fracking brought the cost of crude down from $120, which was workable for algae, down to sub 50. And we looked at each other like, wait a minute, if we don't want to do algae supplements, we're out of the algae business. And so that's when we correctly pivoted from algae to water. Our algae extraction business turned into a water sewage extraction business. We renamed the company from Origin Oil, algae, the original oil, to Origin Clear, clearing up the water. And that was the next phase. I would love to tell you that everything was perfect after that, but it was not. And of course, this is where this philosophy of mine of mistake-based marketing comes in, which is, I like to think of it, there you are in a box, and you're having a heart that you're sort of swimming with all the other fish, and you want to break out. So it was put very well in a Joe Rogan interview by Matt Taibbi, and he said Substack cracked the code, and Substack became dominant, moved way past Medium because they figured out how writers could make money. Well, so that's the next stage, is how do you crack the code, right? What is the element? And that consists of many attempts, like, ping, 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 and then you crack the code, and boom, you're outside the box, and you're in your own space. And here's what's paradoxical at that point. At that point, stop the pinging, start executing, and it, as my rowing coach used to say, after that, it's small changes. Adjust, 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 execute, execute, execute. Keep going fast, but now you're done with radical changes. You found it, stick with it. And that's the market domination phase. So kind of three things: stuck in the box, experiment to find that, crack the code, and then build to market domination.
So now you go through all that, and that kind of leads you to a bit, as you allude to, where you're at today, which is, be careful what you wish for, which is you took on the various positions within your current company, worked your way up to CEO in 2017. Now, walk us through, as you became CEO, you said, be careful what you wish for, but how has it gone? And kind of as you've taken over that role in that position, what has that path been? Has it been, hey, everything I wished for, everything I wanted, money's raining down from the skies and life is perfect? Hey, I realize This is what I hate. I hate it, and we're always on the verge of bankruptcy, or somewhere in the middle. Walk us through that a little bit.
Well, the problem basically with the water industry is it's very resistant to change. And so, it's kind of like, it's a big monolithic, infrastructure type business. And they're like, everything's fine. You people just consume your water, flush the toilets, and you're good. But, there's trouble in paradise. There's a big funding problem with infrastructure, and it's really falling apart. And big producers of effluent, people like breweries that produce a lot of sewage, are being told, well, you're going to have to truck half your sewage to another county because we can't take more. And so you have a capacity problem, you have a quality problem. And basically what's happening is that monolith is falling apart. Now, that's not what we got to. Originally, when we got in the water industry, we're just going to push this cool technology and we're going to license it, and it's going to be great. Unfortunately, the water industry, as I said, is slow to adopt. And so we found ourselves in this constant loop of trying to get the technology to go, and making progress, but by the best estimates, it was going to take 12 to 15 years to find adoption. And I'm not going to do that. So that's when I started casting around for a better way to go. We started buying companies and creating companies, and that was good. But the important thing is I started looking at what's going on in the water business model. Again, crack the code. And what became real to me was that because of the breakdown of central infrastructure, which is not being fixed with money, it's not being fixed at all. They're trying to raise water rates. Do you know that water and sewage rates inflate at the same inflation rate as college tuition? It's ridiculous. So, and even that doesn't fix it. So there's not enough money. It falls short perennially. So what's the solution? Take the users off the grid, unburden the grid. And that became decentralized water and helping companies become self-reliant. And that's become a thing. Like this year, PepsiCo said, we're going to recycle 80% of our water. Well, in order to do that, they have to treat their own water. That's no longer sending it to the city. That's over. Same thing with pharma, chip manufacturing, food and beverage, energy, they all need to treat their own water because they're just too heavy a user. And it's now also true, more and more true of these middle class of users like breweries where they have a lot of output. So decentralization became our thing, and we moved into it with a technology goal and doing well, but again, just growing incrementally. And that's when we arrived at the COVID era, where we realized we really had to change things. We had to, this is in February of 2020, and we just really didn't know what was going to happen. We knew there was a real problem. Wuhan having shut down for a month, price of crude took a deep dive, I think the second week of February. And you're like, okay, this is a real problem. And we didn't even know there was going to be lockdowns and stuff. But we also didn't know there was going to be a CARES Act, that a lot of money was going to be thrown at it. So we're like, okay, this is going to be a capital problem. And, customers are not going to be able to afford these systems. And that's when we came up with the idea of getting investors to invest in water systems that would then be put out on a water as a service basis. The company that wants the water treatment doesn't pay, they pay engineering fees, but they don't pay capital. And they sign a service contract and they pay by the gallon like they're used to. Everybody's happy. And that's the model we're working with right now. It's become really attractive to investors. They like the idea of investing in water like an oil well. So we still have the technology thing going on, which is super cool. And it, post-COVID, really took off. So in 2022, we doubled our business, and looks like we're doubling again this year. So double and double and double. That's super cool for the water industry. But in addition, we have this cool new capital program, which will be like GM Financial and GM. That is starting to be where we feel we've cracked the code, and now we just get into the market domination phase.
No, it sounds like when you're trying to change an industry, it's certainly not as easy. It takes some pivots, iterations, figuring out what the market will bear and how you do that. And sounds like you're certainly headed in that positive direction and making some great progress. So that's certainly some exciting times. So, well, with that, now as we've reached the present day of your journey, and we're already reaching towards the end of the podcast, I always like to wrap up with a couple of questions. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I always like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
I would say the worst business decision I ever made was to leap into this computing space in New York City without adequate preparation. Literally, the first computer I sold, when I demoed it, I didn't know where to find the on-off switch. I think that's criminal. I mean, looking back, and I was like, really, dude? So it pays to get market apprenticeship, familiarization, learn your business, learn from masters. And I figured this out, that, you sort of get into this lone hero mode but you don't want to be Superman. You want to be League of Avengers, right? And that's the second part, is that I really learned that like in New York City, it was me and a bunch of people. Well, no, it needs to be a tight group of fellow managers with you. And that's what I'm very, grateful to have in the current company. I have people who have their own motive power, and I have to tell them on Saturday night, please turn off your freaking phone and take care of your family, because they're that motivated. So that's the other thing, is don't be a lone wolf. Don't be, again, number one is I can figure this out. Number the saying, glowing it right. I'm going to glow it right. I'm going to everything okay. And then part of that also is I can handle it all by myself. That does not scale. It also results in serious problems. And of course, you can't be that. I don't think anybody would. Why would you want to be Superman? What a terrible job.
No, absolutely. So no, I think that sounds like some great mistakes to make, or at least great mistakes to learn from. And sounds like it worked out well, and had some great learnings along the way. So with that, now we're going to jump to the second question I'd like to ask, which is, so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Right. So the first thing is, again, apprenticeship, familiarization, get to know it, really, really pays off. Let's just take a simple example of starting an Amazon business. The last thing you want to do is just start, jump into it and start ordering from China. And now you find yourself in trouble. I've heard those stories so many times. So, either one of two things, either learn from somebody or start on a very low pilot level. Like, I'm going to order some Frisbees and just going to try that out and learn on a small scale. That's number one. And then number two, as I mentioned before, have some idea of how you're going to fund that thing. Now, there's two kinds of startups. One is N+1, that is an existing category, and you're adding to it. You're doing something innovative on top of the existing category. And the other one, this is all from Peter Thiel, is 0+1. There's nothing there, and you're creating it for the first time. N+1, you should be able to, capital should not be an issue. You should just be able to get it going because it's already been mapped. It says, like I say, Amazon business been mapped out. Now it's just a matter of, figuring out your model and making it work. But 0+1, now you've decided to disrupt. And you be aware of what it's going to take. Knowledge is a correct estimation of effort. Know what it's going to take to make it. And it's the 0+1 model is very, very rewarding, but it's super hard because you're creating something where there's nothing at all. And of course, that's what I love, but it has been a lot of stub toes along the way.
No, I think that, it's a balance, with the going it alone, building the team, getting the people around you, and also breaking it into a new market. And, sometimes it makes sense to go one path or another, but I definitely think that the advice you gave is some great ones for their people to take into account on their journey. So, well, with that, now as we are wrapping up the podcast, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Well, my best advice is to come to originclear.com and sign up for my weekly CEO briefing because we lay it all out on the line. And, I like to say we're the most transparent public company in America. That may or may not be true, but we really try hard to tell it like it is. Also, right now you can invest in water on demand in this sort of water like an oil well concept on extraordinarily preferential terms. Literally, we're down to the last 20 investors on the current terms. So I would suggest people go to originclear.com, click on the Invest Now button, join us. Now, currently you have to be accredited, but we also do crowdfunding. We just finished one back in April. We'll expect to start another one early in the new year. So do be on the list, stay in touch, join me on my CEO briefing. I respond to all the comments. It's very interactive and I love seeing everybody there. So that's my ask.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if you ever need help with along your journey with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Riggs, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Devin, thank you for that very cool thought, and I look forward to maybe touching base again in 6 months or a year, and we can update.
Awesome.